Good afternoon.
How you doing, Ian?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Is my mic on?
Yep, you are loud and clear. I'm just going to make you a co-host here. So how are you? How's everything your way?
Things are good this way, buddy. How about you? No weather cooperation again, eh?
Boy, just been a tough spring. We had rain last night, so that got rid of the rest of the snow, so that's good. But just kind of cool today. I thought I was going to move bees, but it was just, then I got sidetracked. But I don't know. They're telling me that there's going to be nicer weather come this coming week. They're actually talking 20s now. So that's going to be a nice change for, maybe even Pollen, I hope. These nests, I mean, I'm starting to see winter shed bees, like brand new bees from the winter shed. And this next week, I'm going to start seeing some freshly reared brood emerge. So we'll start seeing, you know, some kind of youth within the cluster, which we desperately need right now. They're just
Hopefully more
hardly
to
hanging on. The clusters are just, oh, they're being stressed. But within the cluster, there's just a terrific little brood nest going. So I just had to give
yeah,
them time.
I've been kind of staying along with your videos there just to see what kind of spring you're getting, and it looks like they're trying to expand anyway.
Yeah, they're pushing their limits and then the cold pushing them back. But anything that they can maintain is just absolutely fantastic. So I'm looking at it looking, oh, that looks good. Just not a lot of it, but it looks good. So we just need some time to walk out of this cold spring, I think.
Hopefully the weather cooperates, man. 20s, like high teens, that'll let them push that out a little bit farther for
Yeah.
you.
And warm nights too is what we need. So I'm freaking out in the on the honey farm, and my brother's freaking out in the grain farm because usually we have the wheat sowed by now, but when it's just another one of those delayed years, we'll just take it as it comes, I guess, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's smooth for you, buddy.
How's your bees look? The weather's been better for you, or has it been the same?
This this spring, honestly, Ian, it's been the warmest April that I remember.
Oh boy, that'd be nice.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you know it's gone down like the last couple of weeks. It's been fairly seasonal, but the first week or two of April was like we had 18, 19 degrees. Yeah, it's been good.
Oh, that's good. Boy, I'm envious. Yeah, so I've been kind of
Good
pushing
stuff.
you off a little bit because my our schedules haven't been meshing. I want to catch up with you here on the next little
Next installment.
next installment. Do you know if it's global? Do you know if they like you're going to talk about fats here, but do you know if they follow the same type of profiles as you're going to talk about here?
Well, what I know, I don't think they do. I don't think anybody does from a commercial perspective. I don't know is the correct answer there,
Yeah.
but I don't think so.
Okay.
But what's good about places like Global and even Man Lake will do this as well is that you can get them to put in whatever you want,
Oh yeah.
right? And I think once people are a little bit more familiar with the problems of high omega-6 oils, the documented research verified problems of high omega-6 oils, and how to use some higher omega-3 oils
Oh yeah.
in combination, and the benefits of doing that, I think it'll become a little bit more common once people understand some of those challenges. Okay. I have zero rehearsal minutes on this, so this could be pretty rough.
This is the
but
best. I love it. Cold
we'll
open.
jump right
That's what I
into it.
do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So again, yeah, basically, man, I think we can run through a few slides here to give people a better understanding of why you put the lipids that you do in your supplemental patty when you make it yourself, and why I do. So fatty acid profiles of floral pollen. A quick overview: historical practice of lipid and fatty acid supplementation in the preparation of pollen supplements, and what we have learned, and some suggestions for practical application. The addition and discussions of fat or lipids in the preparation of pollen supplements has to date been primarily focused on ideal percentages of total concentration, and more recently, discussions pertaining to the inclusion of phytosterols, namely 24-methylene cholesterol. Just a quick note here on 24-methylene cholesterol or the phytosterol profiles. 24-methylene cholesterol does constitute the most important or dominant sterol in royal jelly with a percentage of 49 to 58% of total sterols. This is followed by beta-sitosterol at 19 to 24% of total sterols. Isoflurane comes in at 9 to 16% of total sterols. Camphosterol at 6 to 7, and desmosterol at 0.5 to 4.5% of total sterols. So phytosterols, we do take phytosterols on from a compositional perspective in bioactivator. 24-methylene cholesterol turns out to be fairly challenging to source. We'll talk about how we kind of get the source of 24-methylene cholesterol here in a few slides. Most commonly, beekeepers and manufacturers have provided the lipid fraction of pollen supplements with the addition of canola oil and or corn oil, which are high omega-6 oils, dominant in omega-6 fatty acids. And more recently, borage oil has been used as a 24-methylene cholesterol source. And it's also a high omega-6 and omega-9 oil. So it's not without its problems. So some questions that I had, and again, I was kind of digging into these profiles as we were working through the botany literature, coming up with the compositions of bioactivator and biocontrol. This information was just coming to light by default, as a byproduct of that exercise. So some questions that popped up in my mind along the way. Does this practice provide the fatty acid profiles required for optimal honeybee reproductive and metabolic health? How does this practice align with the fatty acid profiles found in floral pollen? Are there detrimental effects to the colony when the fatty acid profiles of pollen are not respected? And are we missing easy opportunity to promote better or optimal health by continuing this common practice? So I'll get back to this statement, the importance of reference data. In our review of the botany literature pertaining to the fatty acid composition of floral pollen, 73 fatty acids were identified. 5 fatty acids, palmitic, stearic, oleic, linoleic, and alpha-linolenic acid, omega-3, were common to all samples. And this is what this looked like graphically. This is what we ended up when we plotted this out and took the mean concentrations out of all that data. So this was 577 pollen samples. I don't want to make this sound like it was more arduous than it needs to sound. Some of those studies that we were looking at were analyzing up to like 187 pollen samples one study had in it. So it's not, I didn't go through 577 different analyses to get this data. I don't want to make it sound easier than it was, but it wasn't 577 individual studies. So this is what the mean fatty acid ratios of 577 pollen samples look like when you spreadsheet it out. The key message here, the primary message that I'm trying to deliver is that alpha-linolenic acid, or the omega-3 fatty acid profile, is dominant. Again, this is across 577 pollen samples. That's the primary message here, is that pollen has omega-3 as its dominant fatty acid, not omega-6. So omega-6 comes in at 0.65 under 1. Palmitic is also a really important fatty acid for honeybees as well, nutritionally. Oleic is in just under that. Stearic is in just under that. So the 5 common to all samples that I've just listed off, I just kind of wanted to make a note that I do have 6 fatty acids listed here. So lauric acid made the list, not because it's common to all samples, but because it's well documented to have some fairly important to honeybees antimicrobial effects. So there's a reason that it is fairly common in pollen, but it's not common to all samples. But there's other reasons why it's made its way into our feed formulations. So canola oil contains oleic, so high oleic canola oil is some of the more common varieties being grown now. Comes in at the 65, and again, it depends on whose numbers you look at, but these are generally accepted as accurate numbers. Contains uleic at 65.39%, linoleic, which is omega-6, at 16.32, and alpha linoleic, again, so the omega-3 is down at 7.54%, and palmitic. So the alpha linolenic, the omega-3, and the palmitic are the two most nutritionally important fatty acids for honeybees, and those are they're kind of down at the bottom of the compositional spectrum for canola oil.
So that's why
Corn
you're
oil
telling
contains
me canola
52%.
oils, or excuse me, that's why you're telling me canola oil is not preferable within the patty mix then.
Yeah. When you've asked me that historically, and I think I've given you like short responses saying don't do it, or something quick like that in
Yeah.
response. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it's better than nothing. You need a lipid composition to the patty, and there is some beneficial fatty acids in canola oil's profile, but their proportional relationship is not correct. Like it's not balanced the way pollen provides fatty acids.
Oh, I
But
see.
I guess that's really a way to frame up, what I'm trying to communicate is that we're very much used to the idea that amino acids need to be the proportional relationship. Randy Oliver's done a really good job kind of bringing this to the forefront of beekeepers' minds. Is that there's proportional relationships between amino acids that need to be respected when you're providing supplemental pollen nutrition. What I'm submitting here to your audience is that there's also proportional relationships in the fatty acid composition
Oh, yeah.
of pollen that need to be respected as well. And I'll dig into the research here in a few slides to kind of back up those statements. But yeah, so basically everything in pollen needs to be in pollen supplements, not just haphazardly, but respecting the proportional relationships to one another.
Oh, yeah.
So omega-3 needs to be the dominant fatty acid.
So corn oil is
So
no good
corn oil
either then.
comes in. Yeah, that's it. I won't rattle through those numbers, but you can kind of see them yourself. So the omega-3 comes in at 1%.
Yeah.
Right, and that needs to be the dominant fatty acid in order to be optimal, I guess, for honeybees.
That's too bad, because those are two cheap types of oils that we have readily available to us in the supermarket.
I know. Yeah, it's fortunately, I think the way that I've ended up breaking this down, it doesn't, it does cost more money. But there's no question.
Yeah.
The oils that I'm, gonna on my final slide here, they do cost a little bit more money, but it's not, orders of magnitude. Like
No.
I think it's still, and this is really one of the reasons why I wanted to just share this information with people, because to try to sell somebody this, like it's just not, there's no value proposition there to the end user, right? Like this is just so, the practical application of this is so easy for people to employ that
Yeah.
this is just, people need to know.
Yeah, this is gold.
You made me lose my place, Ian. Where did I leave off? I'm easy to get off track.
I don't even have wine with me right now.
No, me either. I'm drinking carbonated water here, but omega-6 3 ratio more. Okay, so yeah, so let's dig into a few publications here. I thought I had one more slide there before I get into this one. Okay, omega-6 to 3 ratio more than absolute lipid level in the diet affects associated learning in honeybees. The source there, PubMed. So I've just taken little snips here out of the articles just to give you a quick overview. So our results with honeybees are consistent with those found in mammals. Best cognitive performance is achieved by a diet that is sufficiently rich in essential fatty acids, but as long as the omega-6 to 3 ratio is not high, meaning you don't have more dominant omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3 has to be that dominant fatty acids. I'm very familiar with the human literature on that. If you want a bigger brain and you want your brain to work better, have a lot of polyunsaturated fats, omega-3 polyunsaturated fats in your diet. when you're starting from a place of cognitive deficit like I am, you try to tweak all the little biohacks you can out of your.
Yeah, well, I'm no different. Just I have no idea about any of this.
It's too funny. Nutritional effects. Yeah, this was an interesting publication. I don't know, Ian. Maybe if I can send you these article links separately, if you can maybe drop them in the comment section of your video or however you do that,
Yeah,
so people
send them through
can
Messenger,
read.
and I'll put them in the description. That'll work just fine for sure.
Yeah, yeah. There's some really good discussion points in these studies. Okay, so nutritional effects of alpha linoleic acid. Again, that's the omega-3 fraction fatty acid on honeybee colony development. So alpha linoleic acid, or ALA, which is a polyunsaturated fatty acid, or PUFA, as they're commonly referred to, influences honeybee feed intake and longevity. The objective of the study was to research the effect of 6 dietary ALA levels on the growth and development of Apis mellifera ligustica colonies. In the early spring, a total of 36 bee colonies of equal size and queen quality were randomly allocated into 6 groups. The 6 groups of honeybees were fed a basal diet with supplementation of ALA. There were significant effects of pollen substitute ALA levels on the feeding amounts of the bee colony, colony population, sealed brood amount, and the weight of newly emerged workers. These results indicate that ALA levels of 2 to 4%, remember those numbers, of 2 to 4% of the pollen substitute were optimal for maintaining the highest reproductive performance and the digestion and absorption of fatty acids in the honeybees during the period of spring multiplication. Additionally, ALA levels of 2 to 6% in the pollen substitute improved worker bee longevity. So if you're inclined, definitely I encourage anybody to read the details of that paper. I think it was well designed. Effects of alpha linoleic acid on some productive and reproductive traits of the Iranian bee. This present study focused on evaluating the nutritional effects of different levels of alpha linoleic acid, or ALA, on queen spawning. So it's not North American terminology being used here, but on queen spawning, the estimation of adult worker bee population, the production of honey, body fat, and protein, and Apis mellifera meta. The queen spawning, infant and adult bee populations and honey production were remarkably higher in this treatment as compared to other treatments. Accordingly, adding 4%, you can see that 4% number is kind of common along these separate research publications. Adding 4% ALA to the diet could improve the function of reproductive and production traits in Apis mellifera meta. Fatty acid homeostasis and honeybees fed commercial diet supplementations. This one really kind of crystallizes the message that I'm trying to deliver with this little slideshow. Honeybees obtain lipids from pollen or commercial supplements. These supplements do not fully support colony health. We tested the hypothesis that supplements are deficient because they lack essential fatty acids. 5 supplements that were tested had low linoleic acid, or omega-3, acid, and were unbalanced between their omega-6 to omega-3 ratios compared to natural pollen. These data also argue for more linoleic acid or omega-3 acid in commercial supplements. And not only do those data argue for it, but I also argue for it because I've seen it firsthand. Omega-3 deficiency impairs honeybee learning. So there's a common theme. It really doesn't seem to matter what the organism is. Polyunsaturated omega-3 fatty acid seems to be very important for neurological brain function. We found that omega-3 deficiency greatly impaired honeybee learning, extending the finding of the importance of omega-3 to a non-mammal, despite the lack of DHA in its brain. Furthermore, our analyses of pollen suggested that many managed colonies are experiencing a shift in available forage towards a higher omega-6 to 3 ratio, which may be leading to colony declines. Effective diet, lipids, and omega-6 to 3 ratio on honeybee brood development, adult survival, and body composition. I apologize if these are text heavy and I'm just reading verbatim, but it's tough I get myself off script, I go down rabbit holes, so it's important to stick to the slide.
No, we don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole. No, this is good.
Yeah, very good, Ben. Okay, so lipids have a key role in a variety of physiological functions in insects, including energy, reproduction, growth, and development. Whereas most of the required fatty acids can be synthesized endogenously, omega-6 and omega-3 and omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids are essential fatty acids that must be acquired through nutrition. Honeybees or Apis mellifera obtain lipids from pollen, but different pollens vary in nutritional composition, including, and that's really, it's just try not to get down too much of a rabbit hole, but that's one of the primary reasons why first I wanted to ID everything that was in pollen across many, many, many different pollen samples. And I wanted to take the average representation of what they were to mimic that diversity, that, that ideal diversity, right? That's kind of the play there while I was formulating these products. So honeybees obtain lipids from pollens, but different pollens vary in their nutritional composition, including the amounts of polyunsaturated fatty acids. Low floral diversity and abundance may expose bees to nutritional deficiencies. We tested the effects of total lipid concentrations and their omega-6 to 3 ratio on aspects of honeybee physiology, brood development, adult longevity, and body fatty acid compositions. All three parameters were affected by dietary lipid concentrations and the omega-6 to 3 ratio. Higher lipid concentration in the diet did increase brood production, and a higher omega-6 to 3 ratio increased the mortality rate and decreased brood rearing. So when this omega-6 fraction is dominant, it's contraindicated. It does have detrimental effects to the colony. Fatty acid analysis of the bees showed that the amount of lipids and the omega-6 to 3 ratio in their body generally reflected the composition of the diet in which they were fed or on which they were fed. Consistent with previous findings of the importance of a balanced omega-6 to 3 ratio diet for learning performance, we found that such a balanced PUFA or polyunsaturated fatty acid diet with the above threshold total lipid concentration is also necessary for maintaining proper colony development. So if you don't have enough, if you dig into this paper, they're suggesting that the optimal fatty acid concentration is 8%. That's not 8%. That's total concentration of fatty acids. So, I think it's fairly common you see a lot of folks mix with 4%, some with 6. There's a few well-structured research publications that are suggesting that around 8% could be more ideal. Now, there's a caveat to that, though. If you look at some of the consumption rate studies that are done, sometimes it's a part of these fatty acid studies. But what's required there, if you're going to take the fatty acid concentration up like 6-8%, and kind of get it up into what's looking more and more like to be an ideal range, you really have to have a relatively high protein content in that patty as well, because bees preferentially, there needs to be a high protein to fatty acid ratio before the bees will find it, before it acts as a phagostimulant, before they want to eat it, basically. So if you're upping those fatty acid concentrations in a low protein patty, you might not get the result that you're looking
for. Oh yeah, and it's got to be a balanced fatty acid ratio too. Then was what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that's the primary message that I'm trying to deliver with this presentation, is that the balance it's all about balance. And omega-3 has to be on the top. Omega-6 comes in slightly under that. You want palmitic acid to be quite high because it's very nutritionally important for the honeybee, but it's about omega-3 dominance. And yeah.
So then by putting canola oil into my patty mixer for a while, I was doing a detriment to my colonies and with that in there, right? Because it's higher in 6. Or am I reading that wrong?
Well, according to these research publications, it would have been better if you had a higher omega-3 content, for sure.
Higher, yeah.
Yeah.
But not necessarily providing a detriment, though, by putting that oil in there at a higher ratio.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, I try to choose my words carefully around that kind of thing, because you kind of got to take these research publications with a bit of a grain of salt, because they're looking at, okay, if you feed an ideal concentration, you get, this effect, but they're comparing that to a less than ideal concentration. So that negative, so that shortened longevity or less than ideal, reproductive rate. But they're not necessarily comparing that to, a control, so to speak. They're comparing it to the ideal in this scenario, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I would say is that I don't know if it was probably better that you fed them than not feeding them.
Well, there's a good way. That's a good way to put it.
Oh dear. Okay, so I kind of had made reference to there was 5 common fatty acids across 577 pollen samples, and then I kind of made note that I had lauric acid as the 6th fatty acid that I chose to include in my spectrum of fatty acid profile. So I've done that for a reason. So there's some good information on lauric acid. So outside of the honeybee context, you can do some just do some quick cursory level research on lauric acid, and it's highly antimicrobial. It's antiviral. It's antifungal. It's just a very anti-pathogen fatty acid, saturated fatty acid. So the antimicrobial activity of fatty acids against Bacillus larvae, the causative agent of American foulbrood. So various saturated and unsaturated fatty acids were tested for their antibiotic activity against Bacillus larvae, the causative agent for American foulbrood on honeybee larvae. The antibiotic activity of fatty acids may make them suitable for use in prevention and control of foulbrood disease of honeybees. We found that both lauric and tridecanoic acid were the most active saturated fatty acids. The demonstration that certain saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. So the unsaturated fatty acids that they're actually referring to there is an omega-6 fatty acid. So it's not that omega-6 isn't valuable nutritionally or for other reasons. It's just that, again, it's about the proportional relationship needs to be respected. So the demonstration that certain saturated and unsaturated fatty acids inhibit the bacterium responsible for American foulbrood disease of honeybees should stimulate further research directed at practical application. Well, me being me, I'm not necessarily going to wait for that research. I'm just going to get the numbers and I'm going to go for practical application right away. That's kind of what I chose to do. As control agents, fatty acids would be safe and environmentally sound. In addition, they're relative low cost, make them prime candidates for use as prevention programs. So, does this research publication tell you that lauric acid in your supplemental pollen is going to cure American foulbrood or wipe it out of an organization? That's not the case. But when we know that there's fatty acids in pollen that have antibiotic effect against those pathogens, it makes sense to me that we would be formulating our feeds respecting that natural composition.
Is it the same for
I think it's
European
a reasonable
foulbrood?
problem. Yeah, so there is some papers on European foulbrood as well, but the papers on European foulbrood, I should have put them in this. When I send you the research links here, I'll send you one. So there's 2 saturated fatty or unsaturated fatty acids. So alpha linoleic acid, the omega-3 fraction, is there's some research on that being effective against European foulbrood, and actually the omega-6 fraction of pollen, the linoleic acid, has some research. It's actually kind of borne out a little bit in this research publication. So it's not that omega-6 isn't valuable. It's not bad. Like it's an essential fatty acid for honeybees. It just can't be the dominant fatty acid in their supplemental pollen feed, or it's suboptimal, right?
Okay.
Okay, this is the last slide here. There's a little bit going on here, but I'm going to try to give a practical takeaway or where I've landed with that information. So we looked at 577 pollen samples. We determined from that analysis what the proportional relationship is between those fatty acids. What does it look like in pollen, and what are their proportional relationships? That's what we were chasing. So then the question was, how do we mimic that? Like what off-the-shelf thing can I go and grab and start getting my supplemental feed a little bit closer to that fatty acid distribution? So there's been a number, like Ian, you're well aware. I've been probably had a list of oils, a mile long that you've been tinkering with over the years. But at the end of the day, this is kind of where I landed, and I think it's the most practical. It's not perfect, but it gets it in a sensible place, a much better place. So over here in the bottom left-hand corner, basically what I needed to know. So we're looking at coconut oil, borage oil, and flaxseed oil. So flaxseed oil, primarily because it's very dominant in omega-3, alpha linolenic acid. Very, very dominant in that. Borage oil, because I do think it's important to have a source of 24-methylene cholesterol. So borage oil is not very useful nutritionally. Other than that, it's low in palmitic acid. And again, it's omega-6 to 3 ratio is not ideal, but it is really one of the only, I've looked and looked and looked and looked, and I've really dug pretty hard to try to find an alternative source of 24-methylene cholesterol. There's some promising things out there, but I really haven't been able to. 24-methylene cholesterol seems to be about the best that we can do as a practical source for that right now. And then coconut oil, again, nutritionally not very valuable to the honeybee outside of its lauric acid content. And it's, again, lauric acid is not common to all pollen samples, but it's fairly common in pollen, and it does have some documented antimicrobial effects against some fairly serious honeybee pathogens. So that's made its way into the mix. What I needed to know, what I'm looking at down here in the bottom right-hand corner, is just what the mean fatty acid profile looks like if I did a 1-to-1-to-1 of those oils. And the only reason why I did that is because I just needed that visual cue. And I ran that 1-to-1-to-1 mean on several different oil combinations to kind of ultimately land with coconut, borage, and flax. But that visual cue down there is what kind of was I guess, the guardrails, because I was stacking that up against the first slide that I showed you, but what that looks like in pollen across 577 samples. That's what I was chasing. So when you put coconut, borage, flaxseed oil at 1-to-1-to-2, it takes you out to a 4%. I actually don't mix at 4%. It just presents graphically better. To take that up to 6%, you would just bring yourself up, accordingly in those ratios. The proportional relationship doesn't need to change as you bring the total concentration up. You just adjust the, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where this lands is very close to, so if you look at the omega-3 and omega-6 ratio, that's very close. And I can skip back, or people can kind of skip back if they're watching this video. You'll notice that this brings you fairly close to that initial slide with 577 pollen samples. It gives you that omega-6 or omega-3 to 6 ratio that pollen provides. Again, not right down to the microgram, but it's very, very close.
And we're trying to achieve 4 or 5 or percent.
So I try to get between 6 and 8. Like typically I end up landing around 6, 7, but that 6 to 8 mark is kind of, there's some fairly convincing research out there. Again, caveat, qualifier, that the protein content in your patty has to be high enough to have that protein to lipid ratio for the bees to be attracted to it.
Oh, yeah. And I wonder, as the oils increase, also the consumption maybe isn't as palatable to the bees. Also, and you would have to increase the sugars maybe too to help that along. Or what's your comments on that?
Well, I think so. Definitely, there's a threshold for everything, and the bees aren't going to be too attracted to it if there's oil dripping off of it, down between the frames, by any means. But you can get it up to that, 6 to 8%, and it seems to work better than like at 4%. It seems to work better, and there's at least 2 or 3 research publications that I could point to say that 8% range is looking like it's optimal.
Yeah.
But again, the qualifier there is that the pollen supplement has to have high enough protein content. Otherwise, the bees won't touch it. Their consumption rate goes way down. So the more you push the lipids up, the more the total amino acid or the total protein content becomes important, because they need a high protein to lipid ratio, or it loses its attractiveness. But if you can hit that sweet spot between having enough protein and 6 to 8% total lipid fraction with the proportional relationships being respected, get a little bit of magic happening.
Damn, Yeah, if they gave us an hour, that'd be a lot handier than 45 minutes.
I think they have that timed out intentionally.
Yeah, they probably do. It's just enough of an annoyance. We'll buy the damn subscription. I wanted to
Yeah.
mention one more thing before I let you go. Around that 24 meth, I call it 24 meth. It seems to be that elusive cholesterol. Is that something that we can feed the bees to provide, or is that something that the bees themselves create with the feedstuffs that they have? Do you know anything around that?
So I'll be honest with you, I'm still trying to. So the common thought right now is that bees lack the enzymes to convert cholesterol into its 24 methylated, form. But there's some old research. I have an old entomology textbook that I've leaned on fairly hard because there's some really good stuff in there. There was, I think, the 1960s. This book was published, and they did some interesting feeding experiments where they were feeding exclusively cholesterol, and these were isolated bee, experiments. These weren't field experiments, and the bees seemed to do just fine from a reproductive, like multiple generations of brood from a reproductive perspective, with just a source of cholesterol at, at or above 1% of total sterols. So I don't I don't know. I mean, it seems to be the common thought process right now that bees need 24 methylene cholesterol. 24 methylene cholesterol is a pretty dominant sterol in royal jelly. Like it's definitely physiologically important, and it's in pollen. Um, and the general thought process is that bees can't convert cholesterol into 24 methylene cholesterol or other sterols into 24 methylene cholesterol. But then you have these older experiments that, in my view, were fairly well designed that demonstrate that bees can rear multiple generations of brood in the absence of 24 methylene cholesterol by providing cholesterol only. So do they have the enzymatic capability of making 24 methylene cholesterol from a cholesterol molecule? More research is needed. I don't know the answers there, but there's some. If you dig back in history long enough on that thread, there's some conflict. I'm conflicted on. I don't really have a solid opinion on that right now. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And the flaxseed oil, that's the source of the omega-3
Flax,
fatty acid, then is the flaxseed. For the coconut, you're looking at the
yeah,
lauric acid. The borage, we're looking at the 24 meth. And at the flaxseed oil, we're
yeah.
targeting that omega-3.
Yeah, the flax is really the workhorse in that three oil combination in my view,
Okay.
because it's taking that it's making sure that we're getting into that fatty acid proportional relationship that pollen provides, right? And it's
Yeah.
flax oil that's the backbone of that profile. There's another reason why I use flaxseed oil as well, Ian, because there's remnants of phenolic compounds that are remaining in commercially available, like just normal processing standards in flax oil. There's remnants of a compound, a polyphenolic compound called p-coumaric acid. And p-coumaric acid, there was some good research publications on that a number of years ago. I think 2016, 2017, something like that. It's a bunch of research that started to get published on polyphenolic compounds. In particular, p-coumaric acid will activate a genetic pathway in honeybees called the cytochrome P450 genetic pathway. Like that's not a pathway that's unique to honeybees. It's common. Like humans have the P450 gene sequence, but it's a detoxification. In honeybees, it's responsible for detoxification. And they ran some studies on p-coumaric acid feed exposure p-coumaric acid feed exposure with pesticide exposure, and they were able to demonstrate that in the presence of pesticides and p-coumaric acid, honeybees could detoxify it more readily, and it impacted their longevity. There was some pretty cool studies on that. But anyway, in most flax oils, there's some leftover p-coumaric acid. Is it the ideal dosage range for that? No, but it is a little side benefit with the it's in the shell, right? It's in the
Hmm.
it's in the seed coating. So there's some leftover p-coumaric acid in most of that stuff commercially.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, so the important one's the flaxseed oil,
Little
the
gold.
the oil, the borage, and then the coconut. If we don't have access to borage oil, it's not the end of the world, I guess, right? Because we're just targeting for that 24 meth on that one. With if we don't put the coconut oil in there, is it throwing
I
things
don't
off
think so.
balance, or whether or not we have the coconut oil in there?
No. So nutritionally, it really doesn't provide a whole lot for the honeybees. Like from a fatty acid nutritional perspective, there's not really a big value proposition there. It's really the lauric acid
Just
why
the
I
loric.
use it, just because lauric acid, and I use it at a concentration that puts the lauric acid profile pretty close to what it is in the pollen samples that you find it in. So I don't try to go for super physiological doses or anything, but to me it makes sense that it's an antimicrobial lipid
Oh yeah.
fraction. It's in pollen, so they're it's a part of their natural diet. To me, it just seems like a no-brainer to put it in. The other kind of side benefit, honey, like if you don't buy the like the bleached coconut oil, you want it to still smell like coconut oil.
Oh, okay.
Honeybee, they love it. Like from a stimulant perspective, I find you can really get really aids in consumption as well. Well, two things. So some of those research publications that I've shared demonstrated that when you get the omega 3 to 6 ratio correct in the supplemental feed, you get more consumption rate, more brood rearing, better longevity.
Yeah.
But they do consume more of the feed when the fatty acid profile 6 to 3 ratio is correct. But I would argue that there's probably an adjunct, phagostimulant thing happening with lauric acid from coconut oil because they do seem to be really attracted to it.
Oh yeah.
But nutritionally, it doesn't offer, a whole lot. Um, the other thing, maybe just a quick note here, Ian, before we jump off, you remember we were kind of toying around with red palm oil there for a
Yeah,
while.
I was just going to ask you about where does that fit into the whole the ratio here?
If you look, I kind of stop my screen share here, but if you kind of jump back to either one of those spreadsheets that I was showing, you'll notice that palmitic acid is quite high. It's right underneath of the omega 3 content, so it's a very nutritionally important fatty acid for honeybees. And that was the idea of the palm oil, is because palm oil is very high in palmitic acid, obviously.
Oh yeah.
So we were kind of toying around with that. So if somebody wanted to, get a little bit fancier with, what I'm presenting here with the coconut borage and flaxseed oil, certainly you could add in a little bit of palm oil to bring that palmitic acid content up a little bit closer. But the reason I'm presenting it in its simplistic form here is because, well, I want it to be, financial. I don't want to scare people away here because you can
Yeah.
get your profile a lot better without breaking the bank. You
Yeah.
don't, I tend to take things to the extreme when it comes to honeybee nutrition. And, I've had 8, 10 of these oils and, various, yeah, anyway,
Yeah, the palm
it
oil,
doesn't need to
it
be a
was
company.
the palm oil. I bought it in a pail, and it was a little bit harder to source, and it was a little more expensive. Yeah, I wasn't worried about that so much. I was just dabbling with you there. But would you put it in at like at a one ratio, like a 1 to 1 to 1 to 2, the same or less than that even?
Yeah, I think to get so this profile, so flax oil comes in at 11.82, borage oil comes in at 10.27, and coconut oil at around 8 for palmitic acid. So at a 1 to 1 to 2, respectively, you come out with a palmitic acid uh, percentage of 21.27 and some change. So to get that up where it needs to be proportionately, I think like a 0.5 in to
Point
get thrown
5.
into that mix.
Yeah.
Because you like palm oil has a lot of palmitic acid. Anyway, I hopefully folks find some value in that information. It I encourage you to try it at least. I think you'll like how the bees respond to it. They are very attracted to that lipid composition, and I think you'll do some side by side comparisons. Again, just don't throw it in all your eyes and tell me it doesn't, or conversely that it does work. Do a side by side comparison for a season, and I think you'll like it.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe, well, I want to get back to mixing my own patties here because I'm actually missing it, you know. I like knowing the stuff I'm putting into my patties and then, going through the steps. And although it's a lot of work, although I don't really do it, I give it to Carrie to do. So the work you really, I got to be careful what I say because I don't actually do that work. But what I like about it is I source the ingredients, I put the ingredients in, and I feed it to my bees, so I know what I'm feeding to my bees. I'm not feeding them this unknown, you know. So that's what I like about it. So I might get back into it, but not
Yeah, I think
if I don't, then I'll probably bug global. They make terrific
well,
patties. It's to see what
they
they're
make
putting in
really good
there
patties.
and send them a barrel of
They,
flaxseed oil and see if they'll put it in for me.
yeah, well, that's kind of the cool thing about where this space is headed, and the discussions that I have with really good people at Global, and I agree. I think they make a really good product. But discussions that I'm having with other manufacturers as well, I think that there's an appetite in this space right now to work with beekeepers and provide what they want
Yeah.
and the tools that they need. So I think that there's more than one manufacturer that would be, really happy to mix this into to feed for people.
Yeah. Very good. I think I'll let you go. That was that was a lot to end the day off. So, maybe I'll go grab a glass of wine now. But I appreciate you running through all that. That's good. And I think the anybody who watches this will take a little bit from it and maybe understand it a little bit more. Guys have been emailing me and they're putting canola in. And I said, well, don't put canola in me, but put some flaxseed or coconut oil in there. And I don't actually understand, but you're helping bring that understanding to the whole process. So that's very much appreciated.
Well, I don't want the last 10 years of my life to be in vain, Ian, so I want to share as much of this as I can.
Okay, we'll keep in touch.
Take care, man.
Have a good night.